Teach you to turn that thing up.
To this mirror and see gold. Not cause you arrogant, but more like cause you chose. Israel born grade 8. Even if we ain't make the honor roll. Oh.
Back to 2 Maccabees 9. We read 1, read 1 through 3. And then we're going to drop down to 29.
The book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 9 and verse 1. About that time came Antiochus with dishonor out of the country of Persia.
That's why I wanted to start with the history, so now we're tying it all back together and you can see what happened. Read.
For he had entered the city called Persepolis, and went about to rob the temple and to hold the city, whereupon the multitude running to defend themselves with their weapons put them to flight. And so it happened that Antiochus, being put to flight of the inhabitants, returned with shame. Now when he came to Ecbatane, news was brought him what had happened unto Nicanor and Timotheus.
Right. Now remember, when we read Antiquities, book 12, chapter 9, remember it said, right when he was about to die, or right when he got beat up out of Persia, while he was running away as far as to Babylon, he was told what happened to his generals. These were the generals right here, Nicanor and Timotheus. Read. Remember, we have a celebration of the destruction of Nicanor as well, right? Yeah. Read.
Verse 4. Then swelling with anger, he thought to avenge upon the Jews the disgrace done unto him by those that made him flee. Therefore commanded he his chariot man to drive without ceasing and to dispatch the journey, the judgment of God now following him.
Oh, now we know for sure. When he said, I think that's why I'm going to die, the judgment of God now follows him. Read.
For he had spoken proudly in this sort.
That's because he spoke too proudly, which we already read. Read.
That he would come to Jerusalem and make it a common burying place of the Jews. But the Lord Almighty, the God of Israel, smote him with an incurable and invisible plague.
Oh, so now we know what happened. That's how he had got that disease. We read about it in Antiquities of the Jews. Read.
For as soon as he had spoken these words, a pain of the bowels that was remittless came upon him, and sore torments of the inner parts. And that most justly, for he had tormented other men's bowels with many and strange torments. Howbeit, he nothing at all ceased from his bragging, but still was filled with pride, breathing out fire in his rage against the Jews, and commanded to haste the journey. But it came to pass that he fell down from his chariot, carried violently, so that having a sore fall, all the members of his body were much pained.
Your boy was done in. The Most High God struck him. You see that? Verse 29.
The book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 9 and verse 29. And Philip, that was brought up with him, carried away his body, who also fearing the son of Antiochus, went into Egypt to Ptolemaeus, a Philometer.
You see that? Said it again.
Ptolemaeus, Philometer.
So we know that's who it was, obviously. But you notice how it said Philip, who had his body, who was fearing the son of Antiochus. Why? Because remember, Antiochus was brought up through Lysias. Lysias is the one who put him up as king. Philip was just supposed to be over his education. Remember, we read that in Antiquities of the Jews again. All right? So don't forget that. All right? So now we're tying everything together. I hope you guys are understanding. Go to 1 Maccabees chapter 3. Let's read from 25 to 33. We read this before, so we're going to read it again to remember. 1 Maccabees 25 through 33.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 20.
Oh, chapter 3.
Chapter 3 and verse 25. Mm-hmm. Then begin the fear of Judas and his brethren.
So now I want you to understand. Remember, all this is happening all at the same time. So you can understand the timeline. This is when we read through 1 Maccabees 1 through 4. This is all that's accompanying it. Okay, read.
And an exceeding great dread to fall upon the nations round about them. And so much as his fame came unto the king, and all nations talked of the battles of Judas.
You see that? All nations talked of the battle of Judas. His fame came to the king. He ran up out of Persia. He heard about us. Read.
Now when King Antiochus heard these things, he was full of indignation. Wherefore he sent and gathered together all the forces of his realm, even a very strong army. He opened also his treasure and gave his soldiers pay for a year, commanding them to be ready whensoever he should need them. Nevertheless, when he saw that the money of his treasuries failed, his treasurers failed, and that the tributes in the country were small because of the dissension and plague which he had brought upon the land and taken away the laws which had been of old time.
What that remind you of? What that remind you of? Remember? Who remembers? It said what had happened was there was plague upon the land because he took away the laws. Real quick, go to Kings. 2 Kings 17:24.
The book of 2 Kings, chapter 17 and verse 24. And the king of Assyria brought men from Babylon and from Cutha and from Ava and from Hamath and from Sepharvaim and placed them in the cities of Samaria instead of the children of Israel. And they possessed Samaria and dwelt in the cities thereof. And so it was at the beginning of their dwelling there that they feared not the Lord. Therefore the Lord sent lions among them, which slew some of them. Wherefore they spake to the king of Assyria, saying, the nations which thou hast removed and placed in the cities of Samaria know not the manner of the God of the land.
You see that? They don't know the laws. They know not the manner of the God of the land. Read.
Therefore he had sent lions among them, and behold, they slay them, because they know not the manner of the God of the land.
Read.
Then the king of Assyria commanded, saying, carry thither one of the priests whom ye brought from thence, and let them go and dwell there.
Bring back one of the Levites, and let him be there to do what? Read.
And let him teach them the manner of the God of the land.
You see that? So they had to bring back a Levite to learn the laws so they would no longer get plagued in the land. Let's go back. First Maccabees 3, finish up. Where you at, 27?
27.
Let me look. 29. 20, no, you're in 30.
Yeah, verse 30. The book of First Maccabees, chapter 3 and verse 30. He feared that he should not be able to bear the charges any longer, nor to have such gifts to give so liberally as he did before. For he had abounded above the kings that were before him.
Read.
Wherefore, being greatly perplexed in his mind, he determined to go into Persia, there to take the tributes of the country.
So now we see why he went into Persia. That's why he was trying to go to Persia, to go get more money to pay all the army men. Right? Read.
And to gather much money. So he left Lysias, a nobleman, and one of the blood royal, to oversee the affairs of the king from the river Euphrates into the
So now this is what we read before, right? Read.
Unto the borders of Egypt, and to bring up his son Antiochus until he came again.
One more time, let's go to Antiquities of the Jews, book 12, but this time chapter 7. This time chapter 7. We're going to 2, 7.2, and 3. Antiquities of the Jews, book 12, chapter 7, 2, and 3. Yep, read.
When King Antiochus heard of these things, he was very angry at what had happened. So he got together all his own army with many mercenaries whom he had hired from the islands, and took them with him, and prepared to break into Judea about the beginning of the spring. But when, upon this mustering his soldiers, he perceived that his treasuries were deficient, and there was a want of money in them. For all the taxes were not paid, by reason of the seditions that had been among the nations, he having been so magnanimous, and so liberal, that what he had was not sufficient for him. He therefore resolved
So he was exploiting too much. He was trying to be the man and ran out of money. Read.
He therefore resolved first to go into Persia and collect the taxes of that country. Hereupon he left one whose name was Lysias, who was in great repute, with him governor of the kingdom, as far as the bonds of Egypt and of the lower Asia, and reaching from the river Euphrates, and committed to him a certain part of his forces and of his elephants, and charged him to bring up his son Antiochus with all possible care until he came back, and that he should conquer Judea and take its inhabitants for slaves and utterly destroy Jerusalem and abolish the whole nation. And when King Antiochus had given these things in charge to Lysias, he went into Persia, and in the 147th year, he passed over Euphrates and went to superior provinces.
The 147th year. Read.
Upon this, Lysias chose Ptolemy, the son of Doramenes, and Nicanor.
So this is how these men start to come against Judah, as we always go over that history when we go over destruction of Nicanor. Because Lysias had the reign, he had the control, and he chose who?
The son
Ptolemy, the son of
Ptolemy,
Dormenius,
the son of Dormenius, and Nicanor,
and Gorgias.
very potent men among the king's friends, and delivered to them 40,000 foot soldiers and 7,000 horsemen, and sent them against Judea, who came as far as the city Emus, and pitched their camp in the plain country. There came also to them auxiliaries out of Syria and the country round about, as also.
And that's all we need on that right now. That's all we need on that. So let's go back. First Maccabees 3, we're almost finished.
Verse 3 and
read verse 34 through 38.
The book of First Maccabees, chapter 3 and verse 34. Moreover, he delivered unto him the half of his forces and the elephants, and gave him charge of all things that he would have done, as also concerning them that dwelt in Judah and Jerusalem, to wit, that he should send an army against them to destroy and root out the strength of Israel and the remnant of Jerusalem, and to take away their memorial from that place, and that he should place strangers in all their quarters and divide their land by lot.
Read.
So the king took the half of the forces that remained and departed from Antioch, his royal city, the 147th year. And
there
having
it is,
passed
147th year. Read on.
And having passed the river Euphrates, he went through the high countries. Then Lysias chose Ptolemy, the son of Dormenius, and Nicanor, and Gorgias, mighty men of the king's friends.
From there, go to, I want to show you one more thing, Antiquities of the Jews, book 12, chapter 5. We're going to read 3 and 4. Book 12, chapter 5. We're going to read 3 and 4 now. Book 12, chapter 5, 3 and 4.
King
Right
Antiochus, returning out of Egypt for fear of the Romans, made an expedition against the city Jerusalem. And when he was there in the 143rd year of the kingdom of the...
So that's why we're reading these 140-something years, because when you go into history, it's really like the 300 BCs. So it's the 143rd year of what?
143rd year of the kingdom of the Seleucids.
Right? Read.
Seleucids. He took the city without fighting. Those of his own party opening the gates to him. And when he had gotten possession of Jerusalem, he slew many of the opposite party. And when he had plundered it of a great deal of money, he returned to Antioch.
Read.
Now it came to pass, after 2 years, in the 145th year, on the 25th day of that month, which is good,
Read on.
which is by us called Keslu, and by the Macedonians Apelles.
Oh, so they were calling it Apelles, we was calling it Caslu. Read.
In the 153rd Olympiad, that the king came up to Jerusalem, and pretending peace, he got possession of the city by treachery.
We read that already, right? Read.
At which time he spared not so much as those that admitted him into it, on account of the riches that lay in the temple.
Because he used Heliodorus for that, remember. Read.
But led by his covetous inclination, for he saw there was in it a great deal of gold, and many ornaments that had been dedicated to it of very great value. And in order to plunder its wealth, he ventured to break the league he had made. So he left the temple bare and took away the golden candlesticks and the golden altar of incense and table of shewbread and the altar of burnt offering, and did not abstain from even the veils which were made of fine linen and scarlet.
Here I read. He also emptied it of its secret treasures and left nothing at all remaining. And by this means cast the Jews into great lamentation, for he forbade them to offer those daily sacrifices which they used to offer to God, according to the law. And when he had pillaged the whole city, some of the inhabitants he slew, and some he carried captive, together with their wives, children, so that the multitude of those captives that were taken alive amounted to about 10,000. He also burnt down the finest building, and when he had overthrown the city walls, he built a citadel, or what? How you say it? Citadel. Yeah, I still don't think that's right, but citadel. The citadel is another word for like not a fortress, but a army base, or what today we also call them embassies. Also, when you read in the Bible also calls it garrisons. Right? That's another name for it. All right. Let me finish off. Citadel in the lower part of the city. For the place was high and overlooked. Actually, that's all we're going to read out of that. So, again, remember, we read about this in 1 Maccabees, 1st through the 4th chapter. Right? Mainly the 1st chapter right here. What we exactly read. 1 Maccabees 1:54. We're going to read verse 54, then we're going to read verse 59. 1 Maccabees 1, verse 54, then 59.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1, and verse 54. Now the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 145th year.
145th year.
They set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and builded idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side.
Verse 59.
Verse 59. Now the 25th day of the month.
This is where we read antiquities of the Jews. Read.
Now the 25th day of the month, they did sacrifice upon the idol altar, which was upon the altar of God.
You see that? So this is the 145th year. From there, go to 1 Maccabees 3. Let's go back to chapter 30, verse 39.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 3, and verse 39.
Read.
And with them he sent 40,000 footmen and 7,000 horsemen to go into the land of Judah. And
remember, we read that in chapter 7. Read.
And to destroy it, as the king commandment. Verse 40. So they went forth with all their power, and came and pitched by Emmaus in the plain country. And the merchants of the country, hearing the fame of them, took silver and gold very much with servants, and came into the camp to buy the children of Israel for slaves. A power also of Syria.
So now the other nations was all coming to buy of us slaves. Read.
A power also of Syria and of the land of the Philistines joined themselves unto them. Now when Judas and his brethren saw that the miseries were multiplied, and that the forces did encamp themselves in their borders, for they knew how the king had given commandment to destroy the people, and utterly abolished them. They said one to another, let us restore the decayed state of our people, and let us fight for our people and the sanctuary.
That's why they did it, to fight for their people and the sanctuary. Read.
Then was the congregation gathered together, that they might be ready for battle, and that they might pray and ask mercy and compassion. Now Jerusalem lay void as a wilderness. There was none of her children that went in or out. The sanctuary also was trodden down, and aliens kept the stronghold. The heathen had their habitation in that place, and joy was taken from Jacob, and the pipe with the harp ceased. Wherefore the Israelites assembled themselves together and came to Mizpah over against Jerusalem. For in Mizpah was the place where they prayed aforetime in Israel.
That's Judges, the 20th chapter. Judges chapter 20, verse 1. That's where we prayed aforetime in Mizpah. Judges chapter 20, verse 1. Read.
Then they fasted that day and put on sackcloth and cast ashes upon their heads and rent their clothes and laid open the book of the law wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images.
So remember how, you see how it says we were able to lay open the book of the law? 1 Maccabees 2:48. Read that real quick. This is why we were able to lay open the book of the law, where the heathen had sought to paint their own images in. Read.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 2, and verse 48.
Because under Mattathias, Judas Maccabee's father, read.
So they recovered the law out of the hand of the Gentiles and out of the hand of kings. Neither suffered they the sinner to triumph.
Right, because we had recovered the book of the law from the heathens, because the heathens had sought to paint their own likeness in our book. Read. back at 1 Maccabees 3:49.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 3 and verse 49. They bought also the priest garments and the first fruits and the tithes and the Nazarites they stirred up, who had accomplished their days. Then cried they with a loud voice toward heaven, saying, what shall we do with these? And whither shall we carry them away? For thy sanctuary is trodden down and profaned, and thy priests are in heaviness and brought low. And, lo, the heathen are assembled together against us to destroy us. What things they imagine against us, thou knowest. How shall we be able to stand against them, except thou, O God, be our help? Then sounded they with trumpets, and cried with a loud voice. And after this, Judas ordained captains over the people, even captains over thousands, and over hundreds, and over 50s, and over 10s.
I wonder where he got that from. He got that from Exodus 18th chapter and 25th verse. He got that from Deuteronomy, the 1st chapter and the 15th verse. Read.
But as for such as were building houses, or had betrothed wives, or were planting vineyards, or were fearful, those he commanded that they should return, every man to his own house.
Wow, I wonder where he got that from. That was a law found in Deuteronomy, the 20th chapter, verse 5 through 8. That's the law for men going to war. If you're newly betrothed, you get that year off. You go make your wife happy. You go build a house, go build vineyards so you can eat of it. You can lie in your house, right? So Maccabees was following the law that he had read. Read.
According to the law. So the
you see that? According to the law. According to the law. From there, go to Deuteronomy. Oh, no, actually, we're not even going to read it. We're not even going to read it. Actually, I do want to read this, though. Go to Deuteronomy 20, verse 5 through 8. I will read this. And we're going to go to Judges 7 and 3. I'm only going to point out one thing, because he says, verse 56 says, but as such were building houses and had betrothed wives and were planting vineyards, or were fearful. He said, carry your ass home. Read Deuteronomy 20, verse 5.
The book of Deuteronomy, chapter 20 and verse 5. And the officers shall speak unto the people, saying, what man is there that had built a new house, and had not dedicated it? Let him go and return to his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man dedicate it. And what man is he that had planted a vineyard, and had not eaten of it? Let him also go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man eat of it. And what man is there that had betrothed the wife, and had not taken her? Let him go and return unto his house, lest he die in the battle, and another man take her. And the officers shall speak further unto the people, and they shall say, what man is there that is fearful and faint-hearted? Let him go and return unto his house, lest his brethren's heart faint as well as his heart.
You see that? You see that? Because he'll spread that fear unto the rest of his brethren. When it's time to go to war, if you fear, stay home. Go to Judges chapter 7, verse 3.
The book of Judges, chapter 7 and verse 3. Now therefore go to, proclaim in the ears of the people, saying, whosoever is fearful and afraid, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 22,000, and there remained 10,000.
They was fearful. Them boys was fearful. Let's go back. 1 Maccabees 4, verse 5. Remember, we started off with John chapter 10, right? Read.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 5. And the mean season came.
Now, John in chapter 10, it said it was winter. That's what the mean season is. Read.
And the mean season came Gaius by night into the camp.
One of the men Lysias appointed. Read.
Into the camp of Judas. And when he found no man there, he sought them in the mountains. For said he, these fellows.
Drop down to verse 8.
Verse 8. Then said Judas to the men that were with him, fear ye not their multitude, neither be ye afraid of their assault. Remember how our fathers were delivered in the Red Sea, when Pharaoh pursued them with an army.
So now, Judas gave the speech of being not fearful and remember the battles of old. Remember the battles of old. Drop down to verse 18.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 18. And Gaius.
So wait, first I want us to read one thing. Verse 14 through 15. Read that.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 14. So they joined battle, and the heathen, being discomfited, fled into the plain. Howbeit, all the hindmost of them were slain with the sword, for they pursued them unto Gazara, and unto the plains of Idumea and Azotus, and Jamnia, so that there was slain of them upon 3,000 men.
Read.
This done, Judas returned again with his host from pursuing them, and said to the people, be not greedy of the spoils, inasmuch as there is a battle before us.
He said, hey, don't get happy yet. We still got some fighting to do. Read.
And Gorgias and his hosts are here by us in the mountain. But stand ye now against our enemies, and overcome them, and after this ye may boldly take the spoils.
Read.
As Judas was yet speaking these words, there appeared a part of them looking out of the mountain, who when they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight and were burning their tents, for the smoke that was seen declared what was done.
It said the smoke that the scene was declared that was done, said they was burning them. Go to verse 1. Verse 1.
The book of 1 Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 1. Then took Gorgias 5,000 footmen and 1,000 of the best horsemen, and removed out of the camp by night.
They removed out of the camp by night. 2 Maccabees chapter 12, verse 8 through 12. Let's get some quick details about how much did Judas burn. Said, because it said this fire could be seen by everybody. 2 Maccabees 12, 8 through 12.
The book of 2 Maccabees chapter 12 and verse 8. But when he heard that the Jamnites were minded to do in like manner,
because remember, he ran them all up through there, right? Read.
In like manner unto the Jews that dwelt among him, he came upon the Jamnites also by night, and set fire on the haven and the navy, so that the light of the fire was seen at Jerusalem.
Oh, he set some ships on fire. There was some ships burning. Read.
240 furlongs off.
Read.
Now when they were gone from thence 9 furlongs in their journey toward Timotheus, no fewer than 5,000 men on foot and 500 horsemen of the Arabians set upon him.
Oh, Arabians too. He was burning everybody. Read.
Whereupon there was a very sore battle. But Judas, side by the help of God, got the victory, so that the nomades of Arabia, being overcome, besought Judas for peace, promising both to give him cattle and to pleasure him otherwise. Then Judas, thinking indeed that they would be profitable in many things, granted them peace, whereupon they shook hands, and so they departed to their tents.
Go back. That's why the fire was such a big blaze. That's why you was able to see it so much so. Back to 1 Maccabees 4.
Was that verse 1, or you want to go back to?
Bring it out.
1:1.
No, we're reading 20.
The book is 1 Maccabees chapter 4 and verse 20. Who then they perceived that the Jews had put their host to flight, and were burning the tents, for the smoke that was seen declared what was done. When therefore they perceived these things, they were so afraid, and seeing also the host of Judas in the plain ready to fight,
Go ahead.
they fled everyone into the land of strangers.
Hold on real quick. Read that.
Hey, real quick, go back to 2 Maccabees chapter 12 and verse 9.
And you see they fled everyone to the land of the strangers, them Arabians.
And how when you was reading, it said they could see it afar off, right? Everything that was on fire. It said 200.
It said the furlongs.
The furlong, yeah, the furlong, because they could see it, right? 1 furlong is 220 yards. So there was 240 furlongs off. That's 52. That's 5,200.
So that's how far away.
52,800. That's how far. 52,800 yards.
That's how far
That's
away
how
they
far
could
away
see
they
the
could see
fire. All praise to the Most High. So you see how far away they was seeing that fire. That's how you know it was a lot of things burning. It was ships and everything burning. All right, and they could see it. That, oh, dang, he done burnt up everything over there. All right. That's, you guys got to imagine this thing. That's why it was such war renown. Like, dang, this dude's destroying everybody. Anybody that try to help, they get destroyed. And if you notice, what it keeps saying is Judas was doing it off of what? By the might of God. He always was praying to the Lord. He just didn't depend only on his war skills, but he was depending on the Lord himself. That's why we keep seeing that and keep reading it. But from there, let's go ahead and finish up. Go back to Antiquities of the Jews, book 12, chapter 7 and 4. Book 12, chapter 7 and 4. He's going to give us a little more detail real quick. Just read 4. About this burn. Read that.
And this was the speech which Judas made to encourage them. But when the enemy sent Gorgias with 5,000 foot and 1,000 horse, that he might fall upon Judas by night, and had for that purpose certain of the renegade Jews as guides, the son of Mattathias perceived it, and resolved to fall upon those enemies that were in their camp. Now their forces were divided. When they had therefore supped in good time, and had left many fires in their camp, he marched all night to those enemies that were at Emmaus.
Go ahead.
So that when Gorgias found no enemy in their camp, but suspected that they were retired and had hidden themselves among the mountains, he resolved to go and seek them wheresoever they were. But about break of day, Judas appeared to those enemies that were at Emmaus with only 3,000 men, and those ill armed by reason of their poverty. And when he saw the enemy very well and skillfully fortified in their camp, he encouraged the Jews and told them that they ought to fight, though it were with their naked bodies, for that God has sometimes of old given such men strength, and that against such as were more in number and were armed also, out of regard to their great courage. So he commanded the trumpets to sound for the battle, and by thus falling upon the enemies when they did not expect it, and thereby astonishing and disturbing their minds, he slew many of those that resisted him, and went on pursuing the rest as far as Gadara, and the plains of Idumea, and Ashdod, and Jamnia. And of these there fell about 3,000. Yet did Judas exhort his soldiers not to be desirous of the spoils, for that still they must have a contest and battle with Gorgias and the forces that were with him, but that when they had once overcome them, then they might securely plunder the camp, because they were the only enemies remaining, and they expected no others. And just as he was speaking to his soldiers, Gorgias' men looked down into that army which they left in their camp, and saw that it was overthrown, and the camp burnt, for the smoke that arose from it showed them, even when they were a great way off, what had happened. When therefore those that were with Gorgias understood that these things were in the posture, and perceived that those that were with Judas were ready to fight them, they also were affrighted and put to flight. But then Judas, as though he had already beaten Gorgias' soldiers without fighting, returned and seized on the spoils. He took a great quantity of gold and silver and purple and blue, and they returned home with joy and singing hymns to God for their good success. For this victory greatly contributed to the recovery of their liberty.
All praises to the Most High. And that's how we got that victory. And from that victory, what happened? First Maccabees 154. I'm about to show you the timeline, and we're going to end it. Let's get the timelines in case if you never had it, you got it.
The book of First Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 54.
Oh, wait, sorry. One more thing. Before that, Second Maccabees 8, 1 through 6. Second Maccabees 8, 1 through 6.
The book of Second Maccabees, chapter 8 and verse 1. Then Judas Maccabeus and they that were with him went privily into the towns, and called their kinsfolks together, and took unto them all such as continue in the Jews' religion, and assembled about 6,000 men. And they called upon the Lord, that he would look upon the people that was trodden down of all, and also pity the temple profaned of ungodly men, and that he would have compassion upon the city, sore defaced, and ready to be made even with the ground, and hear the blood that cried unto him, and remember the wicked slaughter of harmless infants, and the blasphemies committed against his name, and that he would show his hatred against the wicked. Now when Maccabeus had his company about him, he could not be withstood by the heathen, for the wrath of the Lord was turned into mercy. Therefore he came at unawares, and burnt up towns and cities, and got into his hands the most commodious places, and overcame and put to flight no small number of his enemies.
Read.
Verse 7, but specially took he advantage of the night for such privy attempts, and so much that bruit of his manliness was spread everywhere.
So he burnt cities too. He burnt cities, navies. He burnt everything. Read.
Verse 8. So when Philip saw that this man increased by little and little, and that things prospered with him still more and more, he wrote to Ptolemaeus, the governor of Cilicia and Phineas, to yield more aid to the king's affairs. Now
Stop. And you see that? So that's what happened. That's why we're world now for what we did. You got to imagine all these fights that we won, everything that we did. This is what we're celebrating. You have to understand what we did and the courage that it took for these men to overcome our enemies. I want us to understand that. Same thing now. It's for us to have the courage, but what now? Now the courage is more spiritual, right? Now the courage is more over our own selves. Now the courage is to stand up and fight against our own enemies spiritually and against our own flesh. Understand that. That's the dedicating that we're doing now. So I pray we understand that. So let's go through these years and finish off.
1 and 54.
Yep.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 54. Now the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 145th year.
It was the 145th year. Go to 1 Maccabees 2:70. So when you find your years, this is the timeline right through the Maccabees.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 2 and verse 70. And he died in the 146th year.
The next year, Mattathias died. Read. Go to 1 Maccabees 3:37.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 3 and verse 37. So the king took the half of the forces that remained and departed from Antioch, his royal city, the 147th year.
You see that? That's when he did that, the 147th year. 1 Maccabees 4:52.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 52. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year.
The 148th year is when we got the altar back. Antiquities of the Jews 12:9-2. I'm just going to read it right here. You can pull it up. I'm just going to read it right here, though, because we read it already. Antiquities of the Jews, chapter 12, book 12, chapter 9:2. It says, however, Antiochus, before he died, called Philip. I'm just going to get down to the point. It's 361. It says, then Antiochus died in the 149th year, the year after we got the altar back. The year after we got the altar back. So let's read it. 1 Maccabees 4:61. 1 Maccabees 4:61.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 61. And they set there a garrison to keep it, and fortified Bethsur to preserve it, that the people might have a defense against Idumea.
Read on.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 5 and verse 1. Now when the nations round about heard that the altar was built and the sanctuary renewed as before, it displeased them very much. Wherefore they thought to destroy the generation of Jacob that was among them. And thereupon they began to slay and destroy the people.
Soon as we built it up, the heathens round about was mad, and they began to slay us. Read.
Verse 3, then Judas fought against the children of Esau and Idumea.
Oh, so if you didn't know, it was the children of Esau, Idumea, who we fought against. Read.
At Arabatine, because they besieged Israel, and he gave them a great overthrow, and abated their courage, and took their spoils.
All praises to the Most High. 1 Maccabees 4:36-60. We're not going to read that all. We're going to just jump up to verse 50.
So you want 36 or 50, sir?
No, we go verse 50. We ain't gonna read it all.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 50. They burn incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlesticks they lighted.
So this is us getting the altar back. Start at 41.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 41. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary.
So while we were cleansing the sanctuary, we was also fighting against the enemy, because they had built their own little fortress inside of our stuff, right? When you go back into the history, they took over, destroyed the sanctuary. Then they used our city as a stronghold. They was bringing in defiled things. They was bringing in their weaponry, and they was using it as a stronghold and kicking us out. Read.
Verse 42, so he chose priests of blameless conversation.
That's who he chose to fight them off. Priest of blameless conversation. Read.
Such as had pleasure in the law.
Such as has pleasure in the law. Read.
Who cleanse the sanctuary and bear out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profane, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them, because the heathen had defiled it, wherefore they pulled it down, and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place, until there should come a prophet to show what should be done with them.
Drop down to verse 51.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 51. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table, and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law.
Rose up in the morning and offered sacrifice. Read.
According to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings, which they had made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned
You
it.
see that Maccabees was paying attention. Judas was paying attention the whole time. He told his people, he said, look at what time that we got this altar back. It's the same exact day that they profaned it. 3 years later, they profaned it on 145. We rededicated it on 148, the same exact day. Right. When we got our brand new school, it was the Feast of Dedication. All praise to the Most High. That's right. All praises. Read on.
Even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals.
So it was dedicated with psalms, citherns, harps, and cymbals with music. Read.
Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days.
Kept it for 8 days. Read.
And offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrifice the sacrifice of deliverance and praise.
Read.
They decked also the forefront of the
And they decorated. Read.
the forefront of the temples with crowns of gold.
They decorate with crowns, gold,
And
crowns of gold, and
with shields.
with shields. So if you guys don't know, make sure if you didn't do it this year, you decorate your homes with crowns of gold and shields. Read.
And the gates and the chambers they renewed, and hanged doors upon them.
Read.
Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that the reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month Caslu, with myrrh and gladness.
So we're going to finish this thing off tonight with mirth and gladness. All praise to the Most High. 2 Maccabees 10. This is it. This is the last couple verses. Start at verse 1. We're going to read to verse 9.
The book of 2 Maccabees, chapter 10 and verse 1. Now Maccabeus and his company, the Lord guiding them, recovered the temple and the city, but the altars which the heathen had built in the open street, and also the chapels they pulled down. And having cleansed the temple, they made another altar, and striking stones, they took fire out of them, and offered a sacrifice after 2 years, and set forth incense and lights and shewbread. When that was done, they fell flat down and besought the Lord that they might come no more into such troubles. But if they sin any more against him, that he himself would chasten them with mercy, and that they might not be delivered unto the blasphemous and barbarous nations.
Oh, that didn't happen.
Now upon the same day that the strangers profaned the temple, on the very same day it was cleansed again. Even the 25th day of the same month.
You see that? The same day they profaned it, the same day we cleansed it. Read.
Which is Caslu. And they kept 8 days with gladness, as in the Feast of the Tabernacles, remembering that not long before they had held the Feast of Tabernacles.
You see that? So how did we do it? We did it because Tabernacles, that was the last feast that we had just did. So we're going to keep this the same way since that was the last one. Read.
When as they wandered in the mountains and dens like
So
beasts.
if you guys have a question about why do we do it like that, there's your answer. Read on.
Therefore they bear branches and fair bows and palms also, and sang songs unto him that had given them good success in cleansing this place. They ordained also by a common statute and decree that every year those days should be kept of the whole nation of the Jews. And this was the end of Antiochus called Epiphanes.
All praises to the Most High God. And this was the end of his ass. And as we know, he got struck with judgment by the Lord and died.
That was what we just went through. Daniel prophesied about. And I ain't gonna lie, I've been studying this as of late more, so to try to go in depth into the quote unquote secular history. And what you'll find out there, you'll find people out there that say Daniel didn't write prophecy. He spoke on something after it happened. But but I want to show you that this was prophetic from Daniel. So go to Daniel chapter 9. And this is just to increase your faith more, to show that our forefathers seen this before it even happened. Showing you what? That this Bible is a true book. Go to Isaiah 34:16 real quick, Joshua, and then go to Daniel 9:1, and then we're going to hit a couple precepts, then we're done. Joseph, I always do that. It is what it is. He calls me Matthias, so what? I'm returning the favor.
Isaiah 34:16.
Yep.
The book of Isaiah, chapter 34, and verse 16. Seek ye out of the book of the Lord and read. No one of these shall fail.
Stop. No one of these prophecies shall fail. Daniel 9:1. We're going to run through this. Because I don't want to hold you up. You guys already been here.
The book of Daniel, chapter 9 and verse 1. In the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus, of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans.
Come on.
In the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years, whereof the word of the Lord came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem.
Stop. So that's just showing you Daniel studied, and he was being prophetic. Because Daniel, he lived in the Babylonian and the Persian captivity. Right? So Daniel's about to prophesy about a captivity away. So it goes the Persian Mede and then Greek. He's going to prophesy about the Greeks. Now go to chapter 8 and start at verse 2.
Book of Daniel, chapter 8 and verse 2. And I saw in a vision, and it came to pass when I saw that I was at Shushan in the palace, which was in the province Elam. And I saw in a vision, and I was by the river of Uli. Then I lifted up my eyes and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had 2 horns, and the 2 horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher came up last. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand.
All right, stop. Hold on. Go to verse 20 real quick so you can see what the 2 horns represented.
The book of Daniel, chapter 8 and verse 20. The ram which thou sawest having 2 horns are the kings of Media and Persia.
You see that? The kings of Media and Persia. So the mightier one was the Persian. What did it say? The higher one was the Persia, and the lower one was Media. Go back and read on.
Verse 4.
Yep.
The book of Daniel, chapter 8 and verse 4. I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. Neither was there any that could deliver out of his hand. But he did according to his will and became great.
So it's showing that they conquered all the other. They were the highest kingdom at the time, right? Read on. So this is Daniel prophesying about the kingdom that he's about to be under next. He's under Babylonian, because when you read verse 1, it talks about Belshazzar, which was the grandson of Nebuchadnezzar, the Babylonian, right? Read.
And as I was considering, behold, an he-goat came from the west on the face of the whole earth, and touched not the ground. And the goat had a notable horn between his eyes. And he came to the ram that had 2 horns, which I had seen standing before the river, and ran into him in the fury of his power.
Stop. Who is this great goat? Go to verse 21 now.
The book of Daniel, chapter 8 and verse 21. And the rough goat is the king of Grecia, and the great horn that is between his eyes is the first king.
Now go to 1 Maccabees 1:1. I ain't going to go through all this because it goes into Antiochus and all that, but I ain't going to hold you up. I don't want you guys to go to sleep. We got to enjoy the feast. But I'm just showing you that our forefathers prophesied. This is faith increasing. Within the scriptures, you're able to see the scriptures being foretold before they actually came to pass. Because remember, Maccabees was written hundreds of years after this. So this is just something to increase your faith, because I know you guys like stuff that y'all don't like the history like that. Y'all don't, but you don't even understand how powerful that class was yet. Y'all understand in a couple years. Read that.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 1. And it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip, the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Shittim, had smitten Darius, king of the Persians and Medes, that he reigned in his stead, the first over Greece.
You see that? That first king, that's what it's talking about. So that was just to boost your spirits, to show you that there's more prophecy than Deuteronomy 28. All right? Because, like I said, I've been researching lately, and there's this dude out there that talks about, he's Amalek, the devil. He talks about that Daniel wasn't prophesying, that he wrote these things after they already happened, which is simple as hell. I just showed you in the scriptures he was during the Persian Mede Babylonian captivity. That was the whole point of that. All right.
Here, just because you brought that out, go to Daniel, stay in Daniel 8. This is just one last thing. Read verse 13 and 14. Because Officer Mathias is showing you how Daniel prophesied that thing. He's seen that thing.
The book of Daniel, chapter 8 and verse 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, unto 2,300 days. Then shall the sanctuary be cleansed.
Golly. Gave you the exact amount of days it's going to happen. What did we just read in 1 Maccabees 1:54? Read it again. What did it say? 2,000 and what days? 2,300 days.
Yep.
2,300 days.
Mm-hmm.
How many days in the year? 365? Yep. 6 years the desolation's going to happen. Golly, that's heavy. Because don't forget, when Alexander came into power, remember, we read that. I know you guys missed it. It said then it was 143. So he started in power in 142. Sanctuary was clean when? Read it. 1 Maccabees 1:54.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1 and verse 54. Now the 15th day of the month Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of the desolation upon the altar, and builded idols.
So that's when the desolation was actually, he had got it. So it took him 3 years to do that. It took him 3 years from 142 to 145 to actually get the desolation going. But it already had started at 142. Now read verse 59, or no. Where are we at? 60, whatever it says. 452, there you go. 1 Maccabees 4:52. Read
The book
that.
of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 52.
Shit, I'm calling scripture.
The book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 4 and verse 52. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Caslu, in the 148th year.
Oh, 148. So 142 to 148, 6 years. Somebody divide 2,300 divided by 365. Oh, my goodness. Daniel that already told you. It's going to take 6 years. That's heavy. All praises, Mathias. That thing's heavy.
We used to scream black power while Heron was pushed. But at the end of the day, nothing's in vain. IUIC has been given a vision. The tents of Judah has risen. Many has attempted the mission. Minor murmuring, omitting, and missing the mark. Just reading that he had the flame of fire in his eyes gave us the spark. We on Paul's mission. We out on the road, purple and gold. From Mexico, Cuba, Haiti, Ghana, Sierra Leone. 144,000 boots banging, concrete crackling. These are our men repented at heart. The scriptures is proof. IUIC, we deliver the truth.